So in this piece, I want to say a few more words about the word reasonable. And, I probably was unreasonable in how many times I used it in the last piece, but it's with good reason. And this is because, unfortunately, in the world of working with people with neurodiverse conditions, we can often reach the point where an employer and an employee can end up falling out, and very occasionally this ends up in court or in arbitration. And at that point, you are going to be required to show that you behaved reasonably in all the circumstances, whether you're the employer or the employee. And what I want to do with this concept term, reasonableness, is demonstrate that in any of the terminology that we use as we go through the course, words have a sort of semi-understood, hard, consensual meaning. But on the periphery, they start to get more and more what we might call weaselly, smoky definitions, not quite sure. So without drifting too much into the politics of a situation, let's look at a subject like gun ownership. In some parts of the world, owning a gun is not illegal. It's almost encouraged, culturally acceptable. In others, it's illegal and you can end up in prison for doing it. So what's reasonable? It depends on all the circumstances, the culture you're in, the beliefs at the time, views, values, so on and so forth. It's not a hard and fast definition. So as far as the test of reasonableness goes, it's worth bearing in mind what would, if we use a legal expression, an English legal expression, the man on the Clapham omnibus, a regular guy in the street, regard as being reasonable. Because if an issue went before a judge or a jury, it would be the test of the reasonable man. So therefore it makes some sense to ask yourself, what does reasonable mean to me? And here we start to get into some sort of an interrogation of beliefs and values. So let me ask you this. When you think of the word or a behaviour which is reasonable, what comes to mind? Can you think of a recent experience or any experience where you felt the behaviour was reasonable? Or an experience in which you believe the situation was handled unreasonably, or you were unreasonable in all the circumstances? And when you think about that experience, how does it come to you? Do you start to feel a bubbling sense of anger? If so, where do you feel that in your body? Where are the emotions held when you consider this concept? If you think about specific individuals, whether they're from your own life or from film, books, television, who are behaving reasonably and unreasonably, what are they like? Another test might be to try and add an objective value to this term. On a scale of 1 to 10, how reasonable do you believe, thinking of a particular experience that you've had, how reasonable or unreasonable do you think that was? And then if, let's say, you scored a 4 out of 10, what might need to change, or what could have changed in that situation to move it to a 5 out of 10 or a 6 out of 10, where a higher number indicates that it's being handled in a more reasonable way? One of the ways of looking at this use of terms is to think about the expression used by the philosopher Ludwig Wittgenstein, who said, "The problem with communication is the illusion that it has taken place." So consequently, when we start to talk with people in the workplace about concentration or literacy or verbal skills or relationship skills, we need to be very, very clear about the terminology that we're using and make sure that so far as is possible, we are achieving a meeting of minds, a common understanding, a shared belief about what this terminology means. And then we can establish fair and reasonable communication. And in the end, quality of life is quality of communication. So it's worth spending some time being clear about what we mean, especially when we're using complicated concept terms like reasonableness and fairness.